Picture this: London, 1970. The swinging 60s are over, but the city's criminal underworld is still buzzing with ambition. Everyone remembers the great train robbery of 1963, right? That legendary heist that became a part of British folklore. But what if I told you about another train robbery, one that was just as daring, just as clever, but has been almost completely forgotten by history? This wasn't a heist on a mainline train speeding through the countryside. This happened deep underground, on the London Underground, specifically the Bakerloo line. It's a story of meticulous planning, inside knowledge, and a dramatic getaway that played out right beneath the feet of unsuspecting Londoners. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the forgotten great train robbery of 1970. The target was a simple, unassuming tube train, but it was carrying something very special. Twice a week, the train would transport the day's earnings from various London Underground stations. We're talking bags filled with cash, a tempting prize for anyone bold enough to try and take it. On this particular August day, the train was carrying the takings from a bank holiday weekend, which meant the haul was even bigger than usual. The estimated value at the time was around £7,000, which might not sound like a fortune now, but in 1970, that was a huge amount of money, enough to buy several houses. It's equivalent to well over £100,000 today. So, the stakes were high, and a gang of thieves had their eyes set firmly on this prize. The mastermind behind this audacious plan was a man named John Gervais. He wasn't your typical smash-and-grab thug. Gervais was a clever, calculated criminal who understood that the best heists rely on information and precision, not just brute force. He had an inside man, a 28-year-old London transport employee who fed him all the crucial details. He knew the route, the schedule, the number of guards, and most importantly, the train's weak points. This insider knowledge was the key that would unlock the entire operation. It transformed a risky gamble into a carefully orchestrated plan. The gang knew exactly when and where to strike for maximum effect and minimal resistance. The plan was brilliantly simple, yet required split-second timing. The chosen location was a stretch of track between Notting Hill Gate and Holland Park stations. This section of the line was perfect for their needs. It was relatively quiet, and crucially, it had an emergency exit shaft leading up to the street, their planned escape route. The gang knew that the train would be moving slowly in this area, making it a vulnerable target. Their strategy wasn't to stop the train with force, but to use the system against itself. They planned to manipulate the signals to bring the train to a halt right where they wanted it. It was a ghost robbery, happening in the dark tunnels while the city above carried on, completely oblivious. On the night of August 24, 1970, the plan swung into action. As the money train trundled along the Bakerloo line, carrying its precious cargo and just 3 guards, the gang made their move. Using their inside knowledge of the signaling system, they triggered a red light, forcing the train to stop precisely at their chosen spot. Suddenly, the carriage doors were forced open. 3 masked men stormed in, wielding kashes, which are short, heavy clubs. The guards, taken completely by surprise, were quickly overpowered. It was a swift, professional, and brutal takeover. The thieves knew exactly which bags contained the cash, grabbing them without a moment's hesitation. There was no fumbling, no confusion. They were in and out like ghosts. The entire robbery inside the train carriage lasted less than 2 minutes. The thieves grabbed the money bags, then vanished back into the darkness of the tunnel. Their escape was just as well planned as the attack itself. They made their way to the pre-identified emergency exit, a ventilation shaft that led up to the surface. Climbing the ladders, they emerged onto a quiet street in the middle of the night, with nobody any the wiser. A getaway car was waiting, and within minutes, they had melted away into the London night, leaving behind a baffled train crew and an empty carriage. The alarm was raised, but by the time the police arrived, the thieves were long gone. The aftermath was a scene of confusion. The police launched a massive investigation, but they had very little to go on. The guards could only provide vague descriptions of masked men. There were no witnesses on the deserted stretch of track. The thieves had been disciplined and left behind almost no forensic evidence. For weeks, the police were stumped. It seemed like the perfect crime. The media reported on the daring heist, but it was quickly overshadowed by other news. Unlike the Great Train Robbery of 1963, which spawned movies and books, this underground version just didn't capture the public's imagination in the same way. Perhaps it was too clean, too clinical, or maybe it just lacked the flamboyant characters of the earlier heist. But as is often the case, the perfect crime started to unravel because of human error. The police got a lucky break. A tip-off led them to a man who had suddenly come into a lot of money and was spending it lavishly. This man was one of the gang members. The police put him under surveillance, and slowly but surely, the web began to close in. One by one, the gang members were identified. The breakthrough came when the police located and arrested the mastermind, John Gervais, and the crucial inside man from London Transport. It turned out that greed and carelessness were their downfall. The thrill of the heist was replaced by the reality of getting caught. The trial was a sensation, but a quiet one. It revealed the intricate details of the plot, from the insider information to the meticulously planned escape route. The court heard how Gervais had been the brains of the operation, directing his team with military precision. The London Transport employee confessed to his role, explaining how he had provided the gang with the timetable and security procedures. In the end, the evidence was overwhelming. Gervais and his main accomplices were found guilty and sentenced to long prison terms. The inside man also received a significant sentence for his betrayal of trust. Justice was served, but most of the money, however, was never recovered. It had been spent or hidden away, a final, frustrating mystery for the authorities. So why has this incredible story been so thoroughly forgotten? A few reasons. Firstly, timing. It happened just 7 years after the 1963 Great Train Robbery. That event was so monumental, so mythologized, that any subsequent train robbery was bound to live in its shadow. Secondly, there were no famous characters like Ronnie Biggs or Buster Edwards. The 1970 gang were efficient criminals, but they weren't folk heroes. And finally, the location itself. A dark, dirty tube tunnel just as romantic or cinematic as a mail train racing through the moonlit English countryside. But make no mistake, the 1970 Bakerloo line robbery was one of the most audacious and cleverly planned heists in British history. A crime that unfolded right under London's nose, a hidden chapter in the city's long and fascinating story. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary stories are the ones that go untold, hidden away in dusty police files and old newspaper clippings. The next time you're on the tube, rattling through the dark tunnels beneath London, spare a thought for that night in 1970 when a handful of daring thieves stopped a train and vanished into the night. If a fortune, it's a piece of hidden history right beneath your feet. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into a forgotten crime, please hit that like button and subscribe for more hidden histories. See you in the next video.